Usher just cracked open Sean Diddy Combs' federal trafficking case like a vault, ripping up a 25-year gag order to describe candlelit flavor camp rituals, NDA booby traps, and an alleged video stash that could bury Bad Boy for good. His explosive testimony, peppered with journal entries, missing royalty spreadsheets, and a midnight phone call from a terrified 15-year-old Justin Bieber, has prosecutors salivating and hip-hop royalty quietly lawyering up. Stick around for raw courtroom audio, behind-the-scenes footage, and the receipts Usher claims will turn Diddy's empire into a cautionary tale for every aspiring artist. What you are about to hear is drawn from sworn testimony and corroborating evidence in the ongoing federal trial of Sean Diddy Combs. For 25 years, a single non-disclosure agreement kept R&B prodigy Usher Raymond legally muzzled. Now, the platinum icon has ripped that paper wall to shreds, revealing a shadow empire of ritual parties, iron-clad contracts, and careers manipulated like chess pieces. His words reordered decades of hip-hop history and threatened to topple a hierarchy that once looked untouchable. Remember this date, because after today, the music industry can never pretend it didn't know. But Usher's first night in Flavor Camp was only the opening chord of a much darker composition. Usher remembers the elevator ride to Diddy's penthouse the way combat veterans recall first gunfire. Every sensory fragment forever etched in place. The brass doors slid shut behind him, trapping the scent of champagne, cigars, and something faintly medicinal that clung to velvet drapes. He was 14, carrying a single duffel and a head full of Billboard dreams, already replaying the advice Reid had offered moments earlier. Soak up everything, son. But the instant those doors parted, the mentorship fantasy split at the seams. Music videos had taught him to expect glamour. Nothing prepared him for the collision of decadence and disarray sprawled across the living room. Platinum plaques served as coasters for sweating bottles of Cristal. A half-dressed sitcom star snored on an antique fainting couch, while an MTV VJ rummaged through a bowl of prescription pills as casually as candy. The stereo pumped unmixed demo tracks so loud, the sub-bass trembled inside his ribcage. Yet not a single adult seemed interested in nurturing vocals or arranging studio sessions. Instead, Diddy, radiating the effortless confidence of a man who controlled entire radio rotations with a late-night phone call, wrapped an arm around the teenager's shoulders and whispered, "School starts now. Rule 1, don't ask, just watch." Usher felt the words settle like wet cement. He'd been invited to observe, not to question, and certainly not to sing. Hours bled into days under a neon blur of endless parties mislabeled as networking. Morning sunlight streamed through blackout curtains to reveal strangers rifling through designer closets, searching for their shoes, their dignity, or both. Diddy's entourage spoke a dialect of power Usher had never heard, conversation punctuated by million-dollar side bets, inside jokes about favors owed, sideways glances that froze dissent before it formed. A veteran bodyguard slapped down a deck of playing cards and explained the real hierarchy: loyalty on top, talent somewhere in the middle, curiosity at the bottom where it got people erased. By the third dawn, Usher realized he hadn't vocal warm-upped once. The closest he came to a rehearsal was harmonizing with a tipsy model over arcade machine bleeps at 4 a.m. Yet every time fatigue dragged his eyelids closed, Diddy materialized, with another A-lister to impress, or another parable about how grown men roll. It dawned on the boy prodigy that he wasn't here to refine falsettos. He was here to internalize a social algorithm. Luxury plus secrecy equals leverage. He swallowed the lesson, even as nausea curled in his stomach. If this was chapter 1, what horrors waited deeper in the mansion? And somewhere between the masked faces and the midnight soundtracks, a single sleepless night would deliver the moment that scorched away the last of his childhood innocence. The fourth evening in the penthouse etched itself into Usher's memory with the clarity of a lightning flash in pitch-black countryside. He awoke to muffled bass notes sneaking under his door and a strand of cinnamon-scented smoke curling through the keyhole, signals that something unscheduled was unfolding. Pulling on yesterday's jeans, he stepped into a hallway lit only by flickering votive candles, each flame mirrored in polished marble like tiny amber portals. Silent staffers in immaculate black shuffled past, carrying silver trays stacked with lacquered masquerade masks, ivory, onyx, gold leaf, while a handheld camcorder hovered at shoulder height, its record light a single red eye tracking every movement. Nobody spoke. Instead, they communicated in discreet nods and finger taps, choreography so practiced it felt ritualistic. Usher froze when a stylist clipped a velvet ribbon around his wrist, labeling him an observer rather than a participant, and ushered him toward the living room transformed into a dreamlike amphitheater. Celebrities he recognized immediately. Chart toppers, award-winning actors, even a political scion. Donned masks without question, their real faces already traded for anonymity. In one corner, an unfamiliar man flicked through a laminated roster, checking off names and adjusting lighting angles, as if prepping for a clandestine film set. Usher's chest tightened. Whatever was about to begin had been rehearsed long before he arrived. Positioned behind a grand piano for cover, he watched as the house's regular rules of opulence rearranged themselves into codes of silence. The music dropped to a throbbing drone, conversations dissolved into staged murmurs, and two security guards swung shut a pair of wrought iron doors, sealing everyone inside. From that vantage point, he noticed details no magazine ever captured. A row of numbered data cards ready to archive footage, a bucket of prepaid cell phones to replace personal devices, and a handwritten disclaimer on the coffee table warning that unauthorized disclosure incurs immediate liability. At that moment, the boy understood his true lesson wasn't about beats or melody. It was about observing compliance under pressure. A masked woman approached, nodded, and placed a single finger to her lips, a silent contract, before leading him back to his bedroom with instructions to sleep until daylight. He lay awake until dawn, pulse pounding in his ears, replaying the sequence of glances and gestures that stitched the spectacle together. When the sun finally breached Manhattan's skyline, every candle had been snuffed out, the masks vanished, and the apartment gleamed as though scrubbed by time itself. Breakfast was served with breezy small talk, but no one referenced the night. Erasure was part of the ritual. Usher understood two immutable truths. Questions would brand him a liability, and behind Diddy's charisma loomed a culture that prized secrecy over talent. He didn't yet realize the next invitation, a tropical retreat with confiscated phones and armed gates, would push that culture past the point of no return. The promised retreat began with a private jet whose cabin lighting cycled soothing gradients of aquamarine, an artificial preview of the water below, while Diddy regaled his hand-picked entourage with stories of moguls who made billion-dollar decisions. Over weekend getaways, 14-year-old Usher sat belted beside a tinted window, clutching a demo cassette like a talisman, until a flight attendant relieved him of the tape. No tech toys on this leg, sweetheart. That was lesson one. The island demanded total surrender. On landing, guests forfeited their phones to a security desk that cataloged each device, slipped it into a Mylar pouch, then slid the pouch into a fingerprint-locked vault as casually as storing coats at a gala. A motorcade of black, sand-dusted, jeeps wound through mango groves toward a hilltop villa whose white stucco walls reflected the sun so fiercely they seemed to erase shadows themselves. Inside, bedrooms were assigned via embossed envelopes. Usher's read simply, "Observer." He opened his closet to find linen suits tailored to his measurements and a single black silk blindfold on a brass hanger, proof that someone, somewhere, had planned this weekend down to the millimeter of his inseam and the circumference of his fear. From the first sunset dinner, power dynamics replaced menu courses. Lobster tails arrived beneath silver cloches bearing personalized fortune cookie slips, not aphorisms but custom ambitions. Your next single will chart #1 if you learn the art of patience. Guests laughed, but the implication wasn't lost on Usher. Success here came attached to obedience. Conversation never touched music theory or vocal stamina. Instead, titans of fashion and finance exchanged passwords to gated influence. Who could open can, who could bury a scandal, who could greenlight a Super Bowl halftime. Whenever Usher drifted toward industry chatter, a maitre d' steered him back with gentle reminders to listen more, take notes later. After dinner, the villa transformed. Butler uniforms switched from white linen to crimson brocade. Candlelit corridors pulsed with bass so low it vibrated crystal sconces. And a stone courtyard overlooking nothing but black ocean became an amphitheater ringed by draped cabanas. Usher was positioned at the edge, eyes unbandaged, yet hands tied metaphorically by the weight of expectation. Here, anonymity protected the powerful, and the powerless were protected only by their silence. He watched alliances cemented over whispered dares, watched a celebrated film director sign a waiver he didn't read, watched multiple cameras rotate on silent gimbals capturing angles no tourist would see. when a masked host finally approached and murmured, "Privilege is not a choice. It's a burden you accept." Usher felt the villa's marble beneath his feet tilt, as though gravity itself respected the hierarchy. Dawn arrived smelling of gardenias and sea salt, but the teen prodigy understood something rank lingered beneath the fragrance. Every favor carried a corresponding debt, and waiting back in Manhattan, hidden in the fine print of an artist development contract, was the first invoice for that debt, one that would muzzle him for years and cost him far more than royalties. The document looked standard: artist development, royalty splits, marketing commitments, but buried on page 9 was a confidentiality addendum dense enough to choke an attorney. Usher's mother, trusting the label's assurances, co-signed. He was 16. Among the usual boilerplate lay a clause forbidding discussion of private events, audiovisual documentation, or proprietary guest experiences on penalty of liquidated damages that dwarfed his advance. The hush money clause, he realized years later, was retroactive to age 14. Fast forward to 2009. A major magazine scheduled an interview, dangling a retrospective cover story. Halfway through prep, Usher received a 2-line email. "We remind you of Section 10. Reputations depend on discretion." A team member whispered that Bad Boy's old legal arm still tracked outgoing press requests. Then came unlisted number calls advising him to think about family safety. He canceled the cover. The NDA had turned his memories into landmines. Until the night, a terrified voice on the phone forced him to relive his own initiation. July 2011, 11:58 p.m. Usher's cell lit up with a number he recognized from mentor check-ins with Justin Bieber. No words at first, just shaky breathing. Then, "I want to come home." The teen sensation vanished for 48 hours. When they finally met, Bieber kept his eyes fixed on table grain, muttering, "It's fine, I'm good." Usher saw his 14-year-old self reflected in the kid's tremor. He stormed into Diddy's office demanding, "What happens at these camps?" Diddy laughed, soft, almost sorrowful, and said, "Same thing they did to me, bro. It's the cost of staying on top." That sentence detonated every rationalization Usher had used to survive. He pressed management to pull Bieber from any unsupervised retreat, earning a reputation for being difficult. Rumors circulated that Bieber's team feared losing VIP doors if they crossed Combs. For Usher, the last excuse shattered. The machine wasn't broken. It was designed this way. And in a machine built on leverage, money speaks louder than talent. A sympathetic accountant quietly slid a spreadsheet across a cafe table. 18 rows of unpaid international mechanical royalties total $4.3 million, all traceable to clauses in Usher's first deal. He learned that maintaining silence was literally budgeted, a cost of doing business. Trail the numbers, and you found Carl Thomas, Black Rob, Total, Craig Mack, voices once charting side by side with Bad Boy's founder, now pushed into contractual exile until they accepted pennies on the dollar, or simply vanished from playlists. Usher confronted Combs again, waving the figures. Diddy chuckled. "If you saw the real numbers, you wouldn't sleep, kid." That response became folklore among disgruntled alumni. Laughter is lockdown. Some artists took settlements just to regain legal rights to perform their own stage names. One vocalist, furious, threatened to sue. Within a month, her demos were reportedly shredded in a studio trash run. She's since lived off the grid. Yet the most tragic casualties never filed paperwork. They disappeared between headlines. There were the flavor camp proteges who spiraled after the spotlight dimmed. One OD'd, another quietly offed himself, a third checked into psychiatric care under an alias. PTSD became an unspoken epidemic among those who survived the Penthouse years. Usher read the statistics, but faces mattered more. A sax prodigy who once jammed in Diddy's living room, now busking anonymously in Jacksonville. A backup singer, too afraid to testify, still answering calls from unknown numbers at 2 a.m. Court documents show that several therapists flagged a pattern. Young black musicians presenting with trauma, typically associated with cult extraction. Labels called it burnout. Doctors called it grooming fallout. When Dawn Richard hinted on livestream that she once watched Cassie punched backstage in 2010, commenters spammed cap. Today, those same commenters replay trial coverage, stunned, and so Usher stepped into the witness box, not to reclaim royalties, but to expose a system. May 6 to 9, 2025. Usher sits under oath, NDA posted on courtroom monitors like a relic of state secrets. He speaks for 5 hours, voice steady until he recounts the confiscated phones, the island villa, a freak-off video library rumored, to catalog every compromising moment. The prosecution argues racketeering and trafficking. The defense paints him a disgruntled former protege. But jurors watch the handwritten journal pages, timestamps matching known tour gaps, names of witnesses already subpoenaed. Usher caps his testimony with a thesis that echoes beyond the marble columns. This was never just one man's vice. It's an industry built on young ambition and older appetites. If the jury convicts, Diddy could face a life sentence. If they don't, the NDA graveyard may still empty, because silence now looks more expensive than truth. And when silence loses its currency, history demands a closing verse. Usher's story began with a 1 in a million talent plucked from Atlanta churches and sold a dream in Midtown glass towers. It ends, at least for now, in a federal courtroom where that dream is dissected into evidence exhibits and legal precedent. Behind every platinum plaque, a paper trail. Behind every backstage pass, a gatekeeper. The takeaway isn't simply that one mogul may fall, but that an entire ecosystem only functions when young artists agree to swallow secrets for chart placement. If hush clauses bought decades of radio silence, this trial is the final overdraft notice. Whether Diddy walks free or not, the industry's quiet calculus of leverage has been exposed line by line. So, to every listener who once danced to these records, consider the stories buried in those beats. Drop a comment below with your thoughts, subscribe for the next chapter in this unfolding saga, and remember, truth may arrive late, but interest accrues. See you in the next one.